Hello F1 fans and welcome to F1 On and Off the Track with Kim Illman. You can see his photos at prostarpics.com or follow him on Instagram at Kim Illman. My name is Adrian and in this episode we're talking about Leclerc's back-to-back wins.
And what a day to be at the track. Gee, it was a marvellous experience. I was here 2 years ago and didn't really love it because I stayed in somewhere in Monza, but I stayed in a different place, had a completely different experience. But yesterday, with the sea of red and all those Ferrari fans going crazy after the race, it was a real special place to be.
If you've seen the pictures, there's tens of thousands of people filling the pit straight in support for Leclerc.
Oh, it's crazy. There's no other race where they flood onto the track in such huge numbers. Now, at the end of the race, I stood for Parc Ferme and raced out there, and I got an ordinary position. I really wanted to be head-on and shoot Charles standing on that car, but I dipped out on that, and all the Ferrari mechanics and team members managed to get the best spots on the fence for the cars when they came in, the top three cars. So I had a reasonable spot. I was one back, and I missed the shot I wanted. And then afterwards, we have to try and get to a spot to shoot the podium. Now, the podium at this race is completely different to any other race. It's actually partially out over the track, and with the number of people that were in the paddock, they fill the whole pit lane, and it means that it's very important, very hard to get to the spot that I needed to. So really, my podium shots were atrocious. I got a couple that were reasonable, but then all of the people all the spectators get onto the track, and it's just crushing out there. I don't know how they get by. It must be a pickpocket's delight. But they have huge flags that are probably 30 metres long, and they spread them over the top of the punters well after the drivers have sprayed champagne and left that stage. But it's called the Sea of Red. The Tifosi is the name given to all of the Ferrari supporters, and they waited long after the race finish out on the track to see Charles Leclerc, and he actually did grace them with his presence. It was only for probably 5 or 10 seconds. It wasn't like when Lewis wins at Silverstone, he will go out and spend 5 or 6 minutes just lapping up their love. But Charles was quick, went out there, at least let them see him, waved to them, stood on the fence, but then he was quickly back to do the celebration shot in pit lane in front of the Ferrari garage.
Well, speaking of the fans, how was the fan zone earlier in the week?
Yeah, I went over on Thursday, and you had to have a blue wristband to get in. I managed to snag one of those, and it was quite enjoyable. It was a little ordinarily organised, but all the drivers come over, the whole 20 of them, and they come over in twos and do probably 5 or 6 minutes each, sign autographs. And I was quite amazed that there's a number of knew me because of my large number of Instagram followers out of Italy. There were a number of people that recognised me, and I took their photos, and they loved that. But just the drivers are so revered here, all of them, but more obviously the Italian ones take the cake. And when I say the Italian ones, I'm talking Ferrari, I'm talking Alfa Romeo and Toro Rosso, 3 teams that have strong Italian heritage. So those guys were really popular, but not a huge fan zone. Normally, and I was told this only yesterday, that you have to have a 3-day grandstand ticket to get into the fan zone, which excludes all of those general admission people. Seemed a bit odd to me because that would suggest that the numbers would be well down on what you'd have at any other race where anybody who gets a ticket into the race can go and enjoy the fan zone. But yeah, good experience to be amongst those. And of course, when you're shooting that sort of stuff, you get to stand right next to the drivers, and you have a marvellous access.
Now, I believe there was a moment where Renault press officer James Lloyd grabbed the wrong autograph cards.
He picked up a whole stack of autograph cards for Nico and took them out, and he's handing them out. And I think after about 20 or so cards he's handed out, Nico's have run out. He's only got Daniel's left. And it was so funny because he showed me and said, "Oh, look at this. I've only got Daniel cards for Nico to sign." He stood for a photo for me and held it up in front of me. And then Nico, as he was leaving, had one and looked straight at me, held up this postcard with Daniel's picture on it. And it was just a lovely expression on Nico's face. In fact, I had 2 great shots of Nico this race. Yesterday, one of my last shots of the day, he was racing from the hospitality suite over to the garage after the race, probably an hour and a half after the race had finished. And I could see him coming towards me, and he was jogging because he needed to get there quickly and didn't want to do any selfies or autographs. And so I've shouted out from behind my lens while I've still got my eye up to the viewfinder. And I've said, "Nico, well done, great effort." And as he has a want to do with me, he pulls some silly face, pokes his tongue out. And luckily, I get 3 or 4 sharp frames. And I put them up yesterday. And I did notice he shared my picture of him on his story, which is always nice. So, I've got another silly-faced photo of Nico Hulkenberg to add to my list of many.
Another great fan moment was the Federica fan page.
Well, actually, Federica and Davide are huge in Italy. They are the presenters of Sky Italia's F1 broadcast. And out on the driver's raid, I shot all the drivers take off, and then I noticed that those two with a TV crew were walking down along the track on the grass, and they were whipping the fans into a frenzy. So I followed them for a good 300 metres and got some lovely shots of her. But I think what you're talking about is on the Thursday, I came across these lovely guys who'd they actually used some of my photos in their fan page. They produced a huge big banner, and she was actually en route from one side of the track to the other. And I'd seen the banner, and I asked her, "What are you going over there for?" And she said, "I'm going to the TV compound." And I said, "Do you know what's waiting for you?" And she said, "No." So I thought, oh, well, she obviously doesn't know about this banner, and followed her over there and got some lovely photos of her really lapping up the love from these guys who are very strong supporters. I think they've got about 20,000 followers who really love Federica Maslin.
Kimi gave a brief interview post FP2 that was kind of short.
Kimi gave a quick interview with David Croft after one of the sessions, and I was standing right next to him listening and shooting, and the question was, "What happened out there, Kimi?" Because he had a stack and spun the thing. And he just said, "Too much power," and then he looked at David Croft, and then he stepped left to take the next question. And David looked at me, and I looked at David, and I thought, well, that's really all you get from Kimi sometimes, a very simple answer. But then I got this lovely shot of him yesterday. A young kid recognised him, and I've got this shot of him pointing at Kimi, this youngster, and Kimi's just looking at this kid, and the youngster said, "You're Kimi Räikkönen." Very nice moment. And really, you've got to be out and about in that paddock a long time and just be around for moments like that.
Q3 was fairly crazy this race, particularly the last lap. How was that to shoot?
The last lap of Q3. Well, look, I was stuck in a queue. So I was just sitting there waiting for us to get access to Parc Fermé. But from what I understand, I don't think a lot of the drivers got to set a time because they were going too slow, didn't cross the line in time. And we were standing there thinking, what's going on? And next thing you know, the gates open, we're rushing out on the track. So you probably know more about it than I do from the fact that we had very little idea of what was happening.
As a permanent accredited photographer, you get access to the grid before the race. How was this one?
Yeah, that's a real special treat too, to be able to go down there and just be amongst this craziness that for 15, 20 minutes you get to shoot, and there's so many opportunities down there. I shot Charles sitting on the grass as he always does. And this track does have some lovely, rich coloured grass. So the shots with the red of his uniform, his outfit, his race suit and his cap against the green is quite beautiful. And because he started on pole, he was the flavour of the month. And because he started on pole, of course, he was super popular. It was a crush to get a shot. But I got some lovely shots of the young Monegasque sitting there thinking about the race, the upcoming race, which was such an opportunity for him to make his mark, and to do it on his home soil. Ferrari's home soil was quite remarkable. I wandered down the back of the grid, and I was going to get a shot of the cars coming onto the grid, but I was a little bit distracted with some other stuff earlier on, so I missed that. But a couple of celebrities here. We had football players.
Yes.
One chap from Arsenal, I didn't know him from a bar of soap, but he was kicking a footy around with Carlos Sainz at one stage, and also Didier Drogba, both big names for anyone who follows the English Premier League, although somewhat lost on me being an Australian from the other side of the world.
Speaking of Carlos, there's a picture of his garage that looks quite small.
Well, yeah, I didn't realise this. I just thought it was an anomaly with the McLaren garage, but every second garage in that whole pit lane here in Monza is smaller than the other garage. So you've got a situation where it's very tricky for one of the cars to get in and out, and there probably is only about 30 centimetres either side of the car, where they have to be very careful. They have to wheel the car back into the garage, backwards always, on the little, I imagine on the trolley sometimes, and then they have to push the car over probably half a metre to a metre so that there's room to work on both sides of the cars. And I've not seen that with any other track, I don't think, and I'll stand corrected on that, but it seemed odd to me, and certainly a couple of people, once I put that post up on Instagram, corrected me and said, no, I think you'll find it's every second garage that is much smaller than the other car, the other garage in that particular team's spot.
F1 On and Off the Track is presented by ProStarPics.com. Stunning F1 photos live from the track, searchable and downloadable for personal or editorial use. Head to ProStarPics.com at the end of this podcast.
Now, Charles seemed a hot commodity this race with his fan base cheering Carletto as he arrived on race day. Do you know what this means?
I do know. It's I asked one of my guests at the dinner we had here on Saturday night. It means it's a colloquial term for, I guess it's the equivalent in English is Charlie. And they were chanting it when he arrived, because I went out on the last 2 days and covered the drivers walking up this autograph lane. That's one thing I noticed. And the other was every time a Ferrari mechanic walked past, they just had to have the red outfit of a Ferrari mechanic. They were applauded. People that are normally anonymous in the world of F1 were getting applauded. And it was such a lovely thing to see. The drivers mostly stopped for autographs and selfies. On race day morning, it was so wet the night prior that there was lots and lots of water around. So they had huge, big dump trucks dumping rocks. And at one stage, it was a very nice shot to be had, but I just didn't get quite the right angle of a pool of water, and I shot low and got the lovely reflection shot of the driver. But unfortunately, I only ever got their backs, none of their fronts. And of course, Daniel Ricciardo was very popular here too because of his Italian heritage. So he was pretty much lumped in with the three teams' Italian heritage, and then you got Daniel Ricciardo.
How did Daniel see this race, given that he qualified fifth and managed to finish fourth, his best so far?
Oh, he was quite buoyed at the end. I saw him sprint across just before I got that shot of Nico with his tongue poking out. And, he was pretty bloody happy. That was his best result for Renault, fourth. And really, with a little bit of luck, he might have ended up on the podium. He was not that close in the scheme of things to Lewis for third place. But, gee, look, if something had happened to one of those top three cars, he was up there standing on the podium, and that would have been fantastic. I did notice, too, that once the champagne had been sprayed, both of the Mercedes drivers got off that podium very quickly. They just wanted to leave it to Charles to enjoy the real love of that Italian crowd. The crowd wasn't rude to Lewis. They might have given him a little bit of a booing when he came on, but I think that was quickly drowned out by applause. But what I did notice was after, and I spent a little bit of time chasing Charles around and looking for him to get that post-race, those shots that you don't often see. He was such in demand, people pulling and pushing him for selfies, and he really had no security around him. So he was getting a little bit manhandled. But when he went back into the Ferrari motorhome and the doors closed, you could hear this enormous applause inside of the ground floor crowd. And it went on for about 30 seconds, I think, this applause. Then it went quiet for a bit. And then the second floor, or the first level, erupted. So he's obviously walked up those stairs and had another round of applause with those people. So really lovely to see. And just prior to that, I was in the right spot again at the right time, because I could see Mattia Binotto, the team boss, coming towards Charles, and Charles spotted him. And it was the first time they'd really had a moment out of the real public eye. And I got this lovely shot of the two hugging. And it was a bit like a father-son hug. And I was pretty happy to get that shot. And that was definitely my best shot of the weekend in terms of engagement and comments and likes on Instagram, where I put up all my best pictures.
How are people receiving your Women of the Paddock posts?
Hi, that's a real runaway success. I don't think anyone really focuses on the female side of this sport. So in the paddock, it's probably 80% men, 20% women. So I'm on the lookout for interesting women. And every Monday after a race, I do a post, and it's called Women in the Paddock, and I feature 10 women. Now, they will range from women that work for teams, that are guests of sponsors, and sometimes just good-looking women, models, girlfriends, and the like. So I tend to keep a lookout for them. But now I'm finding people who are aware of what I do, in particular women, and who will look at me and smile, and that's great. When I'm taking a photo, ideally you want people looking down the lens of the camera. So I'm doing this interview at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning, and by the time this goes up, I will have posted it. But I've got now, this race, lots of content. Last race, a little bit light on. I was very lucky to find enough women to fill that spot. But certainly for this race, I've been spoilt for choice.
Before we finish up today, Kim, how was your first F1 dinner?
It was excellent. Had some lovely people from all over the world, and a beautiful little restaurant here not far from the track. And it was a few hours of just talking Formula One, and I shared a few tales from the paddock. I talked a little bit about photography, and then it was pretty much left open to those at the dinner to ask questions that I could answer about what life is like when you travel with this amazing sport. So, I think everyone had a great time, and I'm looking forward to doing one on Thursday night in Perth. That's a sellout. My next one will be Austin after that in Texas. That'll be a Wednesday night show, and then I've already landed one or sorted one out for Melbourne, and I think next year I'll try and do as many as I can. People keep asking, hey, you're doing it in Singapore, but unfortunately the Singapore one, if I was to do it on one of the 4 nights, to do it at midnight. It's a night race and everything happens at night. So next year I'll plan for something, but it's probably going to have to be a Wednesday evening. But look, they've certainly proved popular, and a little bit of a different approach to most people. It's a little bit of photography, but more so what's it like in that paddock where you just can't buy a ticket to. You've got to be invited, you've got to be working down there, you've got to get a corporate pack, and even then, most of the time, if you take those corporate packs, you can't stay down there all day. You'll only get a quick tour down there and a look around. So it is this wonderful world that I have this most marvellous access to, and I love shooting there. I love working the paddock, and I'm always aware of just how lucky I am to be involved in this particular sport and get that access.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Kim.
'Tis a pleasure. I start the long trek back to Australia this afternoon, and our next leg, of course, is a short one up to Singapore, which is pretty much a home race for me coming from Perth.
To see any of the photos we've talked about today, head over to prostarpics.com or kimillman.com. You can also stay updated by following Kim on Instagram at kimillman. If you like what you heard today, please give us a review, and remember to hit subscribe to stay posted for our next episode. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on and off the track.
F1 On and Off the Track was presented by prostarpics.com. Stunning F1 photos live from the track, searchable and downloadable for personal or editorial use. prostarpics.com. Head there now.